Alex Garland said during a Q&A that I attended, "Nothing in this film could be invented." And that sentiment is the beating heart of Warfare, the searing new film co-written and directed by Garland and Iraq War veteran Ray Mendoza. Based on extensive interviews with soldiers who lived through the harrowing events depicted in this movie, Warfare offers a meticulous, unflinching, real-time depiction of combat in Iraq during the early 2000s. And I have a lot to say about it, so let's dive in. The film centers on a group of American soldiers trapped in an Iraqi house during a high-stakes recon mission. Under constant threat from enemy forces, the soldiers' situation grows dire when 2 squad members are severely injured and in need of immediate evacuation. The film isn't about politics or strategy, it's about survival. It's about the raw, adrenaline-fueled moments of chaos as young men navigate a nightmare with no clear end in sight. Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza's approach to Warfare shares similarities with the principles of Dogma 95, the film movement founded by Danish directors Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg. Dogma 95 aimed to strip away the artificiality of cinema by adhering to strict rules, such as shooting with handheld cameras, using natural lighting, and avoiding special effects. The goal was to focus on raw, authentic storytelling. Garland and Mendoza adopted a similar philosophy for Warfare, but with an even more rigorous requirement. Nothing in the film could be fabricated. Every event depicted had to be corroborated by the memories of the soldiers who would live through the experience. And this commitment to authenticity ensures that the film never strays into fictionalized dramatization, instead offering a brutally honest portrayal of combat that feels grounded in the lived realities of those who endured it. Every moment, every choice, from the screams of the wounded to the silence of those who can no longer scream, is rooted in memory. Once again, nothing is fabricated, and the result is one of the most intense, unrelenting war films that I've seen in recent memory. From the opening minutes, Warfare grips you and refuses to let go. Early in the film, before a single shot is even fired, I found myself shaking in my seat. And that nervous tension only intensified as the combat began, and I realized an hour later, I hadn't stopped shaking. Garland and Mendoza's commitment to realism is evident in every frame of this movie. There's no score, no non-diegetic music to guide your emotions or remind you that you're watching a film. The sound design is an overwhelming barrage of overlapping voices on comms, gunfire, barking dogs, and the agonized screams of the wounded. Joseph Quinn, for example, spends much of the second half of the film writhing on the ground, screaming for morphine. And even when the camera shifts to another room and we're lingering on another character, his cries persist in the background, and it's this haunting reminder of his suffering, and it's frankly relentless. And the performances are uniformly excellent across the board. You've got Will Poulter, Joseph Quinn, Cosmo Jarvis, Charles Melton, Michael Gandolfini. The list goes on and on. It's a real murderer's row of talented young male actors, whose careers I'm excited to see expand from here. And while the characters lack traditional development, we don't learn much about their backstories or motivations, that's precisely the point. These are young men thrust into a traumatic, chaotic situation driven by shock and adrenaline. Their humanity shines through not in grand speeches or transformative arcs, but in the small, raw moments like a glance or a tremor or a whispered admission of fear. For instance, Will Poulter plays the team leader who is completely knocked off of his axis by an IED blast. He's disoriented and he's overwhelmed, and he confesses to Charles Melton's character that he can no longer lead, passing the mantle in a rare, deeply human moment of vulnerability that I don't see in very many war films. In fact, one striking aspect of Warfare is its refusal to glorify the soldiers as superhuman figures. Unlike many war films that portray their soldiers as ultra-macho, ultra-competent, and almost invincible, Warfare takes great care in highlighting the raw humanity of its characters. These soldiers are scared. They're uncertain and often rattled by the chaos around them. Like when a grenade explodes just feet away, they don't react with unshakable confidence. They're shaken to their core, doing their best to remain professional despite the overwhelming fear. There's a particularly striking moment when Michael Gandolfini's character attempts to administer morphine to Cosmo Jarvis's character, only to accidentally inject it into his own hand. It's a messy, painful mistake, and while it could have easily been played off for laughs, the context of the scene, Jarvis's character screaming in agony, forces the audience to feel the weight of that mistake. And that moment really drove home the reality of combat for me. It's not about heroic feats, but the constant, unrelenting pressure and the very real consequences of every action. Another standout feature of Warfare that I briefly mentioned earlier is the exceptional sound design. Some of the best sound design that I've heard in recent memory. The sound is integral to amplifying the disorientation that the soldiers are feeling, putting you right in their shoes. There are several moments in the film where the soldiers call for a fighter jet to do what's called a show of force. The sound of the jet is almost unbearable, rattling the audience's brain the same way that it's rattling these soldiers' brains. It's not just loud for the sake of being loud, it's an auditory assault on the senses that mirrors the chaos of their situation. And during the sequence where the IED goes off, that sequence is just purely haunting. Voices become muffled, the sound itself seems to distort and drown out, leaving us with nothing but labored breathing of the soldiers. It's in these moments where the sound becomes a character in itself, guiding this emotional pulse of the film, intensifying the feeling of chaos and uncertainty. Every explosion, every gunshot, every strained breath seems to be meticulously crafted to heighten the film's sense of visceral realism. And one of the most striking aspects of Warfare is its framing device. In that Q&A that I mentioned, Garland shared that the film's events were drawn entirely from soldiers' memories. Nothing was invented. This commitment to authenticity leads to fascinating narrative choices. For instance, these soldiers in the beginning of the film commandeer an Iraqi home for their base of operations, with the family who lives there ordered to stay in a bedroom throughout the entire ordeal. And at times, the audience forgets that they're even there. And during that Q&A, Garland revealed that some of the soldiers who were there that day also didn't even remember that there was an Iraqi family in the house with them. And knowing that little detail made me admire the film's commitment to displaying the shock-fueled tunnel vision that these young men were subjected to. The only thing on their minds was survival. This real-world foundation gives the film a kind of immunity to critiques that are often thrown at it by armchair critics. It's easy to analyze a film based on theoretical frameworks, pointing out why a character's arc should have gone a certain way or criticizing its pacing as unrealistic. But with Warfare, you can't ask those questions because it wasn't made for that kind of dissection. It was crafted from memories, real, lived experiences that couldn't have been designed or manipulated for narrative convenience. There are no neat resolutions or artificially crafted moments. The story unfolds exactly as it did in the soldiers' memories. And as uncomfortable as that might make some viewers, it also strengthens the film's authenticity. There's no room to argue about how it should have happened or how it could have ended differently because it's grounded in an irrefutable truth. This is how it was. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about how war films have always fascinated me, both on a technical level and on a philosophical level. I even made a whole video about it that came out earlier this week. And as I've aged, my relationship with the genre has evolved, and society's perspective on war films has shifted as well. The Iraq War in particular has inspired a subset of films that grapple with the tension between visceral, immersive combat sequences and the political context that they're inextricably tied to. Some films lean very heavily into the commentary of what they're trying to say. Take, for instance, the scene where Mark Wahlberg is taken prisoner in Three Kings, or Josh Hartnett's sort of heavy-handed monologue at the end of Black Hawk Down. But then there are other films, like Warfare, that strip away the rhetoric to focus primarily on the human experience. Garland and Mendoza seem to understand that audiences are already bringing the baggage of the Iraq War with them into the theater. This isn't a film that holds your hand or tells you how to feel about the conflict. Instead, it places you shoulder to shoulder with nameless soldiers, forcing you to endure the horror and resilience required to survive. And for my money, it's one of the most subtle and effective approaches to the genre in years. And I've seen some criticism of Warfare for not saying anything politically. And this really reminds me of the reaction to Alex Garland's previous film, Civil War, which similarly frustrated viewers expecting overt commentary. But to me, Warfare is a triumph precisely because it resists that temptation. It's a film that wants to be felt more than interpreted. It immerses you in the visceral reality of modern military combat. It dares you to draw your own conclusions. And this raises an interesting question. What do we value most when we approach a war film? Is it the spectacle, the raw, unfiltered chaos that allows us to experience combat vicariously? Or is it the commentary, the political and ethical framework that contextualizes the action? Or more than likely, it's a balance of both, where one complements the other to shape a more profound narrative. And Warfare doesn't tell you what to think. It asks you to feel the immediacy and horror of combat, But is that enough? For some, the answer is yes, and for others, the answer is no. I tend to lean more in the yes camp. Do we need a war film to provide answers, or is it more effective when it leaves us alone with the questions? What do we learn about ourselves in those moments of silence when the film ends? I would understand some folks being hesitant to see warfare. Our relationship to war cinema is complicated. For many, war films can feel like little more than propaganda or glorifications of military valor, stories that romanticize combat and reinforce nationalist ideals. And for sure, the genre has its fair share of films that fit that mold, painting war as either a necessary evil or as some heroic endeavor. But warfare, I feel, is different. It's about as neutral and forensic an experience as you could get when depicting the chaos and brutality of combat. There's no heroic soundtrack swelling as the soldiers charge into battle. There's no grand speeches about duty and honor and brotherhood. This film doesn't glorify war, in my opinion. It simply shows it relentlessly, unflinchingly, and without judgment. If anything, it strips away the veneer of heroism and presents the raw, visceral experience of combat as it truly is: disorienting, terrifying, and often senseless. For those who worry about the film falling into the trap of glorification, Warfare is, in my humble opinion, a welcome antidote, an unvarnished look at war that refuses to offer easy answers or a comforting narrative. Ultimately, Warfare, the movie, is bold, bloody, and unflinching, kind of like warfare itself. It doesn't let you look away, and it doesn't offer easy answers. It's a powerful reminder of the resilience and the fragility of the human spirit at the face of unimaginable odds. And for me, it's not just a great war film, it's probably my favorite film of 2025 so far, and I urge you all to go see it. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Warfare. Probably going to be a pretty contentious film, as many war films are in general. So if you've seen the film, head down to the comments and let me know what you thought. And if you're one of those people who has no interest in seeing this film whatsoever, head down to the comments and let me know why. I'm kind of curious. I also urge you to check out the video that I mentioned about the philosophy of war movies. I put a lot of work into that, and I'm pretty proud of it. And if you're interested at all in a movie like Warfare, I think you might be interested in that video. But yeah, that's going to do it for me on this one. Warfare, Alex Garland, Ray Mendoza. Probably my favorite film of 2025 so far. Go check it out, and I'll see you all next time.